Damn, y'all. It's not looking too good for Buddy. This man can potentially cross over to the other side. The man Rampage Jackson's son put into the hospital.
You hear the crowd noise in the background of a chaotic wrestling venue. But what started as entertainment spiraled into a scene that now has the fight world stunned. Raja Jackson, son of MMA legend Quinton Rampage Jackson, became the center of a violent backstage altercation after being struck in the head with a prop can by a wrestler known as Psycho Stu. The incident was already dangerous. Raja admitted earlier he was still recovering from a concussion suffered just days before. You hear the crowd noise in the background of a chaotic wrestling venue. But what started as entertainment spiraled into a scene that now has the fight world stunned. Raja Jackson, son of MMA legend Quinton Rampage Jackson, became the center of a violent backstage altercation after being struck in the head with a prop can by a wrestler known as Psycho Stu. The incident was already dangerous. Raja admitted earlier he was still recovering from a concussion suffered just days before. At first, many thought the moment was part of a storyline, but as cameras kept rolling, it became clear the hit was real. Raja, already unstable from his head injury, grew increasingly agitated. Online chat from his live stream pushed him further, mocking him for not retaliating immediately and baiting him into escalating the situation. Eventually, Raja stormed into the ring during Stu's match, sparking a fight that left the scene in chaos. Witnesses reported biting, shouting, and Raja being escorted out of the venue, while threats flew across the floor. As word spread, all eyes turned to Rampage Jackson, known for his fiery personality but also his deep protective nature toward his children. Fans expected a furious defense of his son. Instead, Rampage's reaction shocked everyone. Watching the stream in real time, Rampage openly criticized Raja, mocking the spectacle and distancing himself from the chaos. His tone wasn't supportive, it was dismissive, almost embarrassed. For a fighter whose own career was defined by grit and resilience, Rampage's stance was clear. He did not approve of his son's actions, and he wanted no part in defending what unfolded that night. The line between family loyalty and public disownment had been crossed, and the headlines were quick to capture it. And now the burning question hangs over both men. Did Rampage truly disown his son over this altercation? Or was this the public breaking point of a father who no longer recognizes the man Raja has become? When Rampage Jackson finally addressed what he was seeing on his son's stream, the words carried more weight than anyone expected. Viewers watched as the former UFC champion shook his head, visibly frustrated, while thousands of comments poured in telling him what Raja had just endured. Instead of anger directed at the wrestlers who struck his son, Rampage turned his focus on Raja himself. He mocked what he saw on the live stream, pointing out that Raja was hugging on dudes in tights and suggesting the scene looked ridiculous rather than dangerous. Fans clipped the moment instantly, flooding social media with captions like "Rampage embarrassed by Raja" and "Father turns on son." His dismissal was laced with sarcasm, a sharp contrast to the seriousness of what Raja had been through. At one point, Rampage said bluntly, "I don't worry about him. My son got my DNA. He's tough enough." But instead of reassurance, the tone felt like distance, as if Rampage wanted to separate himself from the spectacle entirely. For fans who know Rampage as a fiery fighter, who once defended his reputation in every cage he entered, the comments felt like betrayal. Many expected a father to defend his son at all costs. Instead, they heard a man seemingly mocking his child's struggle, brushing it off as weakness, and signaling to the world that he wasn't standing by him. The clip spread beyond MMA forums, landing on mainstream fight pages and gossip channels. The narrative was no longer about Raja's concussion or even the violent wrestling altercation. It was about Rampage Jackson's words, whether this was just tough love or the clearest sign yet that he was publicly disowning his son. And now fans are divided. Was Rampage showing brutal honesty that his son needed to hear, or was he abandoning him when support mattered most? Raja Jackson didn't take his father's words lightly. On stream, as Rampage's reaction clips circulated in real time, viewers spammed the chat with messages telling him his own dad had mocked him. Already on edge from being baited by fans calling him a pushover, Raja's mood shifted from frustration to outright rage when he realized Rampage wasn't defending him. He sat back in his chair, visibly fuming, shaking his head as the comments kept pouring in. "Your dad just clowned you. Rampage says you soft." The more they piled on, the more Raja lashed out. His voice cracked between anger and disbelief as he snapped back at the chat, insisting he wasn't weak, that he'd prove everyone wrong. "My dad can't ever call me fake. I'll show him what I'm about," Raja muttered, almost daring the stream to keep testing him. At that point, it wasn't just about Psycho Stew or the can to the head. It was about proving himself to his father, a man whose shadow looms large over the fight world. Raja made it clear that he wasn't going to tolerate the image of being clowned by his own dad. In fact, he began talking about getting in the ring specifically to silence that narrative, telling his viewers, "Bet, you're about to see how fake I am. Watch." The atmosphere around the stream shifted. What started as entertainment turned into something darker. A young man battling humiliation, not only from strangers online, but from his own father's public rejection. Fans watching couldn't help but wonder if Raja's escalating anger was still about the altercation, or if it was now about living up to Rampage's impossible standard. And with every second that passed, one question became harder to ignore. Was Raja fighting his critics that night, or was he really fighting for his father's approval? Fueled by the stream, the heckling chat, and his father's stinging words, Raja Jackson made the decision that shifted the night from chaos into near disaster. When the signal came from one of the workers, Raja emptied his pockets, handed his belongings to his trainer, and walked toward the ring with a look that showed he had no intention of holding back. What was supposed to be a staged interruption quickly unraveled into something real. Cameras captured Raja storming into the match and charging at Psycho Stew. Instead of a playful skit, fists flew and the scuffle turned violent. The crowd, unsure if it was part of the storyline, roared at first, before realizing the tension was genuine. Within seconds, other wrestlers jumped in, tackling Raja to the mat. Eyewitnesses claim he was bitten in the melee, leaving him bleeding and enraged as security scrambled to restore order. Online, the clip spread almost instantly. Fans clipped Raja's entrance into the ring, paired it with Rampage's dismissive remarks from earlier, and labeled the night the Crash Out stream. On Twitter and TikTok, hashtags like Raja Jackson and Crash Out began trending. Some users mocked him as a failed showman who couldn't separate fiction from reality. Others expressed concern, pointing out his recent concussion and questioning why he was allowed near any physical altercation in the first place. The optics were brutal. Raja looked unhinged, swinging inside the ring while his father sat miles away mocking him in front of thousands. Instead of being seen as a victim of bad circumstances, Raja was now cast as reckless, an image that played directly into Rampage's criticism. And so the narrative solidified. Not only had Raja been embarrassed by wrestlers, but he had also been humiliated by his own father's public rejection. The fight world began to ask a painful question. Was this the night Raja Jackson forever lost both his reputation and his father's respect? When footage of Raja storming the ring spread, all eyes turned back to Rampage Jackson. Fans waited for him to defend his son, now that the altercation had clearly escalated beyond control. But Rampage doubled down instead. On stream, he mocked what he saw, saying Raja looked foolish wrestling with men in tights, and insisting he had nothing to worry about because his son got my DNA. To viewers, the message was unmistakable. Rampage was distancing himself, not defending him. The contrast was striking. One clip showed Raja shouting in rage after being bitten in the ring, vowing to stand up for himself. Another showed Rampage smirking at the spectacle, brushing it off as if it were nothing more than embarrassing theater. Side by side, the videos painted a picture of a fractured father-son relationship playing out in real time for the world to see. Fans online reacted with disbelief. Some argued Rampage's words were tough love, the kind of blunt honesty he was known for throughout his fight career. Others said it crossed the line into humiliation, calling it heartbreaking to see a father clown his son instead of standing up for him. "Your son gets jumped in a ring, and you call him soft," one fan posted. "That's not tough love, that's abandonment." Inside the wrestling community, the response was just as divided. Promoters admitted off record that Psycho Stew often blurred the line between storyline and reality, but many criticized Raja for lashing out. At the same time, several wrestlers privately said they were stunned that Rampage didn't come to his son's defense. "We thought he'd be furious," one said. "Instead, he embarrassed him even worse." And with each replay of Rampage's reaction, the narrative hardened. Raja hadn't just lost control in the ring, he had lost the backing of his father in front of thousands of fans. For Raja Jackson, the aftermath was heavier than any strike he had taken in the ring. Bruised, concussed, and mocked online, he now carried the weight of knowing his own father had laughed at his humiliation. On his stream later that night, his tone shifted between anger and heartbreak. He admitted that the can to the head hadn't physically hurt as much as the disrespect, first from the wrestlers, then from the fans, and finally from Rampage himself. The chat didn't let up. Comments flooded his feed, calling him a pushover, a fake crash out, and even using his father's own words against him. Every taunt seemed to hit harder than the last, with Raja pacing, ranting, and trying to convince himself and everyone watching that he wasn't weak. "I'm not soft. I'll show them. I'll show my dad too," he muttered, eyes locked on the screen. Behind the bravado, though, the cracks were clear. Viewers noticed his voice shaking, his hands trembling as he tried to explain himself. Friends in the background urged him to calm down, but the humiliation had already settled in. This wasn't just about losing control at a wrestling event. It was about losing face in front of a father whose respect he had been chasing his entire life. Meanwhile, the internet amplified his pain. Clips of Rampage mocking Raja played alongside footage of Raja storming the ring, turning the entire saga into a meme. Fight pages framed it as a generational gap, an MMA legend dismissing a son who couldn't live up to his toughness. To fans, it was entertainment. To Raja, it was public disownment. And now, with his name trending for all the wrong reasons, the question becomes unavoidable. Will Raja bounce back from this humiliation? Or has the rejection from his father broken something in him that can't be repaired? By the end of the night, the story was no longer about a wrestling skit gone wrong. It had become a public family fracture. Raja Jackson walked away from the venue battered and humiliated, with fans mocking him online and his father's dismissive words echoing louder than any blow he had taken. Rampage Jackson, once known for his fierce loyalty to those closest to him, had made it clear on stream that he would not stand behind his son's actions. To the public, it looked less like tough love and more like a father cutting ties. For Raja, the damage went deeper than a single altercation. The night was filled with reminders that he stood alone, betrayed by wrestlers who didn't respect his boundaries, taunted by an online audience that baited him into escalating, and finally abandoned by the one person whose support he expected above all others, his own father. For Rampage, the fallout raises questions about legacy. Fans admired his honesty, but many criticized the way he aired out his son in front of thousands, asking whether disowning Raja so publicly crossed a line no parent should ever cross. "You fight for your family, no matter what," one fan wrote. "Even if they're wrong, you don't let the world tear them down." Others defended him, saying Raja needed to hear the truth, and that Rampage was right to draw a line between himself and his son's chaos. Now the father-son dynamic, once built on a famous fighting name, seems fractured beyond repair. The MMA world is left wondering whether Rampage's disownment was a heat-of-the-moment reaction, or the public severing of a bond that may never be rebuilt. And so the lingering question remains, was this Rampage Jackson delivering tough love to a son who needed it? Or was this the night he truly disowned Raja in front of the entire world? By the end of the night, the story was no longer about a wrestling skit gone wrong. It had become a public family fracture. Raja Jackson walked away from the venue battered and humiliated, with fans mocking him online and his father's dismissive words echoing louder than any blow he had taken. Rampage Jackson, once known for his fierce loyalty to those closest to him, had made it clear on stream that he would not stand behind his son's actions. To the public, it looked less like tough love and more like a father cutting ties.